Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today, our guest is Eric Wood from Judge Memorial, Director of Athletics at Judge. First year at Judge, obviously came from California. We'll get into that later on in the interview. But Eric, thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm glad to be able to have a chance to be here. So thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, Eric, let's have you start by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, background, that type of thing.
Well, I grew up in San Diego. Felt pretty blessed. We grew up with a swimming pool in the backyard, so kind of just grew up being a water person and fairly athletic. You know, parents that told us go out, don't come back until the light goes out, or you hear my mom ringing the bell for dinner.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I went to college. I went to the junior college first. And it was right across the street. So I walked from 6th grade through high school. I walked to school, actually through junior college.
Perfect.
So it was pretty amazing. Didn't have to ride a bus
Yeah.
I think my mom learned real quick when I was, my first day of kindergarten, I walked 3 miles to my aunt's house and nobody could find me. I was at my great aunt's house and she made me cookies and I was having a great old time. And my mom, meanwhile, was freaking out and calling all the school and the police and everyone trying to find me. And about 7:30, she goes, "Does your mom know you're here?" I go, "I don't know." Long story short, from that time on, I had to wear my name badge and that my name is Eric Wood and I'm riding the bus to school.
That's funny. So in San Diego, do you add so after junior college, where did you go to university?
I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Okay.
Got my degree in physical education. My first job was Picnic and Chicken. I don't know if anybody's really heard of that place. I'm kind of dating myself. It was a spinoff of Kentucky Fried Chicken. So
I was going to say, it sounds like a Kentucky Fried Chicken place in California.
Yeah. Well, they had KFC, but they were like a spinoff trying to reap in on their side of it. And then I also worked for my neighbor across the street, who also was one of my mentors. But he was a general contractor. So I would go in and do, general contracting work, put fences in, do a lot of rebuilds and that kind of stuff. I also grew up in the Boy Scouts and doing a lot of camping and backpacking and stuff like that. So I was fairly active, especially when I was younger.
We'll talk about, I assume they had a great youth sport program down in San Diego.
No,
yes.
It's a lot different now compared to, what we had when we were growing up. For us, it was more about just getting out and playing. Now there's a lot more organized sports. I did play AYSO, but that was about the highest end of soccer back in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't run for any track clubs or anything like that. I don't even know if there were any back then. But then when I got to high school, I got a phone call. I still remember my first high school coach called me up and goes, "I hear you're a pretty good runner, so we're going to start our practice." And this was in July. And he said, "Come meet the team." And I started running in July. And we saw the coach maybe once a week at the most. The rest of the time, the captains would just have us meet at one spot and we'd off and run, we go. So that was my introduction to high school sports. I ran cross country, played soccer, and then ran track. My parents wouldn't let me play football, but they let me run. So I did pretty good at that. I ran in my PR in the 5K is 14:50.
Impressive.
Yeah, so I didn't do too bad. We were a pretty good team back in high school. I ended up running track at Southwestern College in San Diego. And I think part of my experience with that is what kind of led me leading towards being being in coaching and athletic administration. I lost out on a full ride scholarship. Back in the day, I got really sick and ended up missing a bunch of track meets, and I didn't know anything about redshirting. And at the end of the season, I'd qualified for state, and I saw the coaches that were recruiting me and said, "What happened?" I stopped getting the phone calls, stopped getting the letters, and they said, "Well, you should have redshirted." And I had no idea what that meant. Fresh out of high school and not knowing what redshirt was. So they told me, "Well, you basically would have one more year of eligibility for college athletics, and we were going to give you a full ride." And I went back to my coach and told him that, and he goes, "Well, I wanted to go out winning. This is my last year as a coach, and I'm retiring after this year." And it really put a pretty solid spin on my career as a runner. I really took it the wrong way and went down. I just stopped running.
Huh. So you're one of the kids that fell through the cracks then.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So talk about, I know you mentioned a mentor earlier, but talk about some of the mentors you've had in your life that made a difference both as an athlete and as a coach and as an AD.
I think, one, he was my neighbor across the street, John Purvis. He was a contractor, but he was also a PE teacher. And for me, it was just how he lived his life and how he was a hardworking person, very dedicated. When I first started teaching, I could take my lesson plans to him or talk to him about what I wanted to do. And he would, any time of day I could call him, and, we would just have a sit down and conversation. It was just really good. My high school coach was an amazing coach, Chip Holmes. I know he's in the Hall of Fame in San Diego now. Actually told me that he felt that I was his first runner his first high school runner that he thought could break a 4-minute mile. Never quite did it, but it was the way he treated me and treated us was really how I tried to be as a coach, and continue to this day how to be as an administrator. I treat everyone fairly, you be responsible, you're accountable, but you always work hard. You give your best effort, and good things happen when you can do that.
You're great. Thank you for sharing that. So Eric, tell us, what's the biggest failure or disappointment in your life, and what did you learn from it?
I think, I had some time to think about this one a little bit, and I think the biggest thing was not getting my credential in California. I applied for it 4 different times, and every time they said, "Well, you have to retake this test." So I passed the test, and then they go, "Well, this test is expired. Now you got to take this test." And so it was like this continual wheel of having to redo all these different tests. And I guess what I learned from it is that I don't always have to be successful following a certain path. So I ended up going down the road of getting my master's, and that opened up even more doors for me than having the credential. So even though I was limited in some respects, I gained a lot more knowledge by doing a different route.
Okay, so you spent a significant amount of time, I would say pretty much all your life in California. So did you spend 30 years in education in California and then decided to come to Utah, retire there, or how does that work?
So right out of college, nothing for jobs. And I'll admit, I took a 9-year plan to graduate from college. And so when it was done, I couldn't find a job. So I went back to San Diego and worked for the contractor, and then decided to become a ski instructor. So I moved to Lake Tahoe and was a ski instructor bartender.
Because I was going to say, there's not a whole lot of places to be a ski instructor in San Diego, but Tahoe would make more sense. Sorry to interrupt. Continue.
No worries. So I moved up to I moved up to Tahoe, and it was amazing life. It was fun, but it wasn't a career. And I got a phone call from a family friend who said that their teacher was injured and couldn't teach anymore, and would I be interested? So I managed to make it work where I was the PE instructor on Monday through Wednesday. And then through Thursday through Sunday, I was a ski instructor bartender. So I did that from October until Christmas.
Okay.
And then at Christmas, at that Christmas, they offered me a full-time job, and I was at that school for 13 years.
And so where was this school in relationship to Tahoe?
That was actually in Los Angeles. That was in actually Orange County in Placentia. So I was
Okay.
at St. Joseph's. And then after that, I went to public schools for 3 years and was an itinerant PE teacher. And then I moved to high school. I've been at 5 high schools since then. So
Four of the high schools in California then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so LA area, Orange County, San Diego.
All LA.
Okay.
I couldn't find a job in San Diego where I could actually afford and live. And I got lucky enough to get something in LA, and I've been working. I was in that system for very long. I worked for LA Catholic, the diocese, for 16 years.
Okay, so back to the original question. So with all of your time in California,
Mhm.
were you able to retire from California before you got to Utah, or do you still, are they gonna have to have you wait till you get a certain age in Utah before they'll give you retirement there? How does that work?
Well, when I got married, I cashed out my first retirement from the Orange County, which was the K-8 school that I worked at.
Mhm.
And then I was able to actually get my retirement from LA as well. So that helped us with the move, and that helped us kind of get back on even keel. So yes, I did retire from the Diocese of Los Angeles. I definitely moved here I'm not a hamster on the hamster wheel anymore. I can actually enjoy my life and live. And I was spending anywhere from 3 to 4 hours just in the car, just going to and from work because of the traffic.
Wow.
And then you add your 12 to 14 hour days as an administrator, and that's, do that for 16 years, and it takes a toll.
Oh, absolutely.
So for
Absolutely.
me, through my networking, I was blessed enough to have an opportunity to interview, and I haven't looked back, and I am feeling so blessed to have this position.
So were you an athletic director the whole time in California, or did you coach some first, or were you an AD?
I started off as an athletic director and ended up having to coach a few sports. And then the one school closed down. And then the next school I went to, I ended up coaching and athletic directing. And
Okay.
then the one school that I was at for 1 year, I was just a coach and a math teacher. And then Bishop Montgomery was my last school in California, and I was there for 8 years, and I was strictly athletic director. I did not teach, or it was just straight AD.
Okay, so you're the AD there. So you've put in your time. You think maybe you want to move. You heard about the job at Judge, or did they call you? You put feelers out to move up here?
I'm part of a couple of different organizations, and so there's a Catholic National Athletic Directors Group.
Right.
And when COVID hit, we were meeting on Zoom quite frequently, and there were a couple guys from Utah on there, and one Chris Long was deciding to retire.
Chris Long, who
then
lives just right around the block from me.
Yeah, well, he's in South Dakota now, so
Yeah, well, I know he's in Custer State Park. I saw that.
enjoying the good life, as they say. But then Scott Platts had had been in several of our Zoom meetings, and he was, I think I want to go back to the classroom and just coach. I don't think I want to do AD. So I've let the school know, and so I submitted my resume and got a phone call, and I think it was, I want to say 2 or 3 Zooms later, I was offered a contract. I flew out in May to look at a house and go look for housing, and I was blessed enough to get one right next to school, and that kind of sealed the deal for me. I took a pretty large pay cut, but at the end of the day, my gas bill is amazing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm walking to work every day, which is, you can't beat that. It's pretty amazing to be able to walk to work. I do drive, I still put the miles in every now and then, especially when it comes playoff time.
Sure.
But it's not every single day that I'm in the car for 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah, I can't. That's from my house. You can get to St. George in 4 hours.
Yeah.
But that's obviously that, that California traffic is crazy. So let's talk for a moment about when you first got the job as an AD and the job as an AD now. How has it changed since when you first started from your perspective?
The biggest thing is the parents have changed and the liabilities have changed. We have a lot more liability, a lot more things that we have to be aware of and pay attention to. Not that we didn't do it as much, but it's more on our radar now. It has to be more on our radar. The coaching certifications, the parents doing, making sure they have all the proper paperwork in, making sure they have insurance, making sure parents are behaving and coaches are behaving at games. A lot of, even the kids. When I was coaching, I had a rule with my team. If you drop bad language, we were extra conditioning every single time. And so my teams always knew that. But it wasn't hard for me because that was a culture that I built as a coach.
Mhm.
I'm working on that as trying to build that same culture as an administrator, because I believe strong in that. I think how you represent yourself, how you speak, how you behave, how you handle your business is very representative of who you are and who you're representing. And I think that you work in certain areas and there's a certain culture, and they don't understand that you're not going to get forward in life if you handle yourself in a certain way. And part of that starts on the athletic field. If you're yelling at people and cussing at coaches and cussing at referees, and I think at the end of the day, it's a big difference now. So I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so along with that, answering that question, so you've only been an AD in Utah for 1 year, but you were an AD in California for quite a number of years. So I'm interested, because I would have no idea, I know being an AD would be an AD, but is it different in Cal? You were in a private school, in a Catholic school, but you spent probably some time being an AD in a public school also, both in California, and now you're an AD in Utah. Is it the same almost always, or are there some subtle differences, or is it because there's so many more people in California? Does it make a difference?
The biggest differences is, because there's so many more people, you have so many more schools. It's just the amount of games. Like our boys basketball team would play 35 games a year. Where I think our girls basketball team played, I think it was 26 this year, 27.
And that would include the state tournament with it.
Yeah. So what happens is in California, you have your section, because there's 7 different sections. So you have a section playoff, then you have a regional playoff, which is basically North and South region, and then you have the state playoff. So you can imagine how much longer, playoffs are almost a whole separate season on top of your regular season.
Right.
The other thing that's a big, there's different rules, different things that take place. And that's been the biggest change for me, is trying to learn the Utah rules, not only the judge rules, but the Utah rules, opposed to what we did in California. There's, even to regards of how transfers are handled.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar, but it's different. So in Utah, you can, even though you don't meet the criteria, you can always file an appeal and get in front of a committee to try to voice your way around that.
Right. California,
if you don't have a valid excuse, and there's basically only 2 things that can get that, you've got 4 criteria. If you're not in those 4, then you're just not going to play.
Well, and I think there's a segment on the executive committee that wants that. Yeah. But then there's another segment that says, do we want to be that rigid? I mean, we've been dealing with this transfer rule in Utah ever since I started. And of course, when I started back at Jordan, that's 79, that's over 40 years ago. So there's a lot of different opinions about that.
I felt this way even in California. I think every child, because at the end of the day, this is about the kids. Every kid deserves 1 free transfer. You give them 1 free transfer, not a right fit, not the right coach, not the right school, mom and dad move, whatever, one freebie. And then after that, anything more, the thing that I've noticed a lot, especially as we're getting older, is we are held accountable for all of the negatives in society. So that the ones that are doing it the wrong way, we're being held accountable. So some guy puts a bomb in his shoes, now we can't wear shoes in the airport. You know, it's one in how many people. Now, of course, that transpires to a very dangerous situation and can be pretty severe consequences. And but I guess what I'm saying is that I think we need to focus on the kids and the positive side of it instead of on the negative side. Yes, there's always going to be people that are going to try to find the shortcuts, try to find the easy way around that. But when you look at it, how many of those kids are actually being affected by this?
Yeah, good point. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's talk for a moment. And I realize this journey hasn't been very long, probably a year or less, but let's talk about your journey with the UIAAA, the Utah ADs Association, because you're, I won't say you're a first year AD, it's a first year at Judge Memorial.
Yeah.
But we've got you on our athletic director executive committee, which has obviously been a blessing for us. So talk about how that happened, how you became involved, and how you enjoy that. And did you have an opportunity like that in California?
I've had a similar opportunity in California. I was a CIF representative from our area league. I was a league coordinator. So I did have some experience with some of that, but I never quite got to being on CIF committees, which would be kind of like the coaches committees that we have in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. But they also take it to where you can get on the executive committee and some of these other ones. I believe it was kind of an interesting journey to be part of ADEC.
Okay, and explain why that's, of course, you being new to it. So explain that to our listeners.
There was some confusion or some misunderstanding
Communication,
between the region and between the between ADEC, between the executive committee. And so they thought they had a person already coming in, and then I got a phone call asking me if I was interested. And so of course I'm, for me, it's the more I can be involved, the better. I like to think that I can have a positive impact wherever I go, and I can present things in a fair way, but at the end of the day, it's always about the kids.
Right.
And that's what we have to remember, is that it's not about my own agenda. It's not about, hey, you're on this committee, so how can I make things go my way? It's about looking, hey, this is what's the best thing for the kids. So I was asked, and I've been on the committee. It's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to teaching some classes for the admin for the NIAAA. I'm working on, even though I feel like it's a double education, I am working on my certification. Probably by the end of this week, I will become a registered, because I've already taken the classes. I just have to take care of the paperwork.
Sure.
I told my principal that I will definitely do the CMA test this year, because I've taken enough classes to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can, I just have to sit down and crank that stuff out, and then I'll study for a while and see how I can do with another test.
Oh, that's awesome. We certainly appreciate your contributions on the ADEC level, and really, it's been nice to get some different people, some new people, so it's not always the same people. So let's talk about what's one common myth about being an athletic director that you would like to debunk.
This one kind of stumped me a little bit. I don't really know a common myth. So that's why I was kind of like, well, I think that, I guess one thing is that you can't be a good coach and be a good administrator. I think it's challenging, but I don't think that that's impossible.
Right.
I think What I found is when I was doing both, I had to rely on my assistant coaches because as an administrator, that takes precedent over being a coach. And sometimes there were situations where, I'm coaching soccer and all of a sudden I had to go to a basketball game because something was taking place. And, it's kind of hard to do that in the middle of a game unless you
Yeah.
have a good staff. So I think trying to do both is kind of it's a challenge, but it's doable. It's just not everybody can do it.
Okay. I like that answer. What's the favorite part of your job, Eric?
Watching the kids and coaches in action. I just every day, getting to see coaches and how they do what they do, the way they present it, the way they act, and then the kids watching the games, just, that spirit of competition and just, sometimes when I go to track meets and I start watching, I start thinking, well, shoot, maybe I can go run again. I want to go start running again. And I got to lose a little bit of weight because I got a little bit on me, but
Don't we all?
the thought comes back at me. I haven't touched a soccer ball in 16 years. I broke my jaw 2 times playing soccer, so that's going to be a hard sell on my wife. But the best part is just getting out there and watching, watching how they do what they do. I think that's just an absolute blast.
Perfect answer. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's wrap this up with a couple of questions. The first one being, if I ask you for 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator, that they would have to follow these suggestions in order to be successful, from your perspective, what would those 2 suggestions be?
First and foremost is networking. Networking is absolutely the most critical. Not only getting to know the community and the assets in the community that can help you to be beneficial, but also in knowing coaches, knowing your administrators, but knowing other athletic administrators, getting to know them, getting to know the people at the state. Because the more the network is, the more they can help you and the more you can share your knowledge with them. And I think, for me, I've been super blessed with every job has been part of my network because, my work ethic and how I represent myself is always, a school's closing down and all of a sudden now I'm out of a job. If I didn't have my network, I certainly wouldn't have popped right into my next job.
Sure.
If they were deciding to combine the position through my network, I got offered a coaching job for 1 year. So it's very, but on the other side of that, as a administrator, the more people I know, if I need to have an electrician come out, or I need to have a plumber come out, or I need to have, a safety inspection, or I need to get my CPR first aid done, the more people that I know through my network, the more I can make things happen. I think that one of my big things that I believe very strong is that I would rather be proactive instead of reactive.
Well said.
And so part of that is that networking helps you to be able to do that. The second one is to build the trust of your coaches in your network. I think that, that especially this year for me, first year coming off of, meeting all these coaches and having them have previous expectations and having to sit down with them and say, I'm not that person. I'm a different person. You will see me, I'll be in before most of you are here, and I'll be in the office long after you're gone. And I think it's not just because I want to punch the time clock, it's because I believe very strongly in building that relationship. And in order to do that, you've got to have the time in to do that. You're not going to get to know me, decide whether you like me or want to work with me in 2 conversations. It takes a time to build that up. And so building that trust is paramount to being successful.
Great suggestions. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's finish with this. And at least you think it was my idea. I obviously plagiarized this from someone else. Eric, what questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
The best stuff that we do is when we steal and reuse it. That's the life of us. I think the one thing is, how do you balance athletic director with your home life? And how do you see that as, avoiding the burnout?
And that's a
Because
great question. So share with our audience how you avoid that.
moving to Utah.
Oh,
So, and you know, I was part of a great school, very, very high profile athletics. We were competitive. We were playing with, you know, Sierra Canyon, Mater Dei, Chino Hills, all these top schools that, you know, top athletic competitiveness. And so it was a lot of, but the drive made my home life not, I wasn't home very much. So my wife really didn't get to know me.
sure.
And in the last year, I've been fishing, I've been kayaking, we love to go to little holes in the wall places. We just get out and enjoy. And so taking the time to get out, enjoy life along with what you do for work, that's absolutely critical. I think that, you know, if I can invite my wife to come along and she can come to some games, that gives us that together time. And I think that that's important. If you don't do that, you could get sucked up and burned out real quick and easy.
Well, that's a great answer. We'll wrap it up with that question. That wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Eric Wood, Director of Athletics at Judge Memorial Catholic High School. Eric, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you. It's been a blessing. I really appreciate this.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.